We finally made it to the NBA Finals. Before I go into the NBA Finals, actually, welcome to Studio Steve, episode 4. Of course, you can see in the background LeBron James. You can see the Miami Heat. You know what we're getting into. Before we do that, though, I got to give props where props are due. We got to talk about the Western Conference Finals, specifically because of the Denver Nuggets, what they brought to the table, what Jamal Murray did, what Nikola Jokic did, what that whole team did, and the coming out party for Jeremy Grant. We're a league and a sports world obsessed with numbers these days, probably and mostly because of betting and Moneyball. So I just want to run over some numbers real quick before we go into the finals. I just want to cap off the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. Denver, in that game 5, goes on a 7-1 run at the end of the first quarter. And all of a sudden we start thinking, the comeback kids, the cardiac kids, they got it again. They're doing it. 3-1 series. Are they going to do it 3 times in a row in the same playoffs? In the closeout games in the playoffs, Murray averaging 33 points a game. Of course, he had that 40-point monster game 7 against the LA Clippers, who flopped and folded pretty heavily in that series, and scoring 50% from the field goals as well. Nikola Jokic in closing games in this playoffs, 50% from the field, 53% from 3-point field goal range. And eventually the wear and tear laid in on these guys. Jamal Murray, it should be noted, entered the bubble with some injuries, ended up playing over 710 total minutes in the 2020 playoffs. So, of course, when you saw him hobbling around in Game 5 against the Lakers, it's pretty obvious why. He's put in a lot of work. Jokic got in early foul trouble. The rest was history. Jeremy Grant kept Denver in that game, and probably a few of the games, actually, in that series, and it was sort of a coming out party for him. He's a free agent after this season. So with guys like Fred VanVleet, Jeremy Grant, who are good addition pieces to a team, who can put up buckets and who can play in the playoff pressure cooker. It's going to be interesting to see where these guys go or if they stay and continue to build the legacy with the teams that they're with right now. The Lakers, of course, subsequently ended up winning that series and are in the finals right now. On the other side, we saw the Heat and the Celtics take it to Game 6. At the end of the Game 5 loss in that series, Bam Adebayo went to the press conferences and said, "This one was on me. I played terribly." So you knew he was going to come back. He scored 13 points in all of Game 5. Came back in Game 6 and scored 16 points in the first half alone and ended up with 32 points and grabbed 14 rebounds and was a deciding factor of that game. In the fourth quarter, he had a monster dunk, not only on Mike Tice, but on the entire Celtics organization and faithful. He dunked on everyone. And then he was involved in 4 to 5 plays after that directly. The Miami Heat went on a 26-6 run in the fourth quarter and completely opened up that game and took over. Jimmy Buckets was doing his thing again. Tyler Hero, 13 points in the second half, 12 of those in the fourth, ended up with 19 in total. The Heat subsequently go to the finals. After all of that, the Heat win the East, the Lakers win the West, and now we're set for the 2020 NBA Finals. I couldn't be happier because you're seeing two teams that haven't been here in a while. Lakers haven't been here since 2010, of course, when Kobe and Gasol led the Lakers to a Game 7 victory over the Celtics. And the Heat, of course, haven't been here since LeBron James won back-to-back titles for them. I am bringing in, again, welcoming back, who is going to be pretty much a staple on this show whenever we talk basketball for sure. A good friend of mine, Chris Moore. We're going to welcome him back to the stream. Sir?
Sup, Nate?
How you doing?
I was listening very intently to everything you just had to say, and I was in complete agreement with the stats. I'm not going to check your stats. I trust you. I have trust in you. I'm your friend. I believe in you. That was a good lead-in. It was a good intro. And what do you want to talk about first?
The first thing I wanted to ask you, are you surprised with either of these teams being in the finals?
No, not surprised. I mean, a lot of the surprises came in the last round, with Denver beating out the Clips. I don't think people were surprised. I think it was a pick'em against Boston for the Heat. I think it was a pick'em against the Raptors, for that matter, for Boston against the Raps. We don't got to go back that far.
We don't want to go there. No,
we want to keep it in the present. So no, I think that given if you want to check the Vegas odds, I'm not a gambling man, but I know folks that do, and I will say that honestly, I think that it is not a surprise. This is where we are.
Yeah, no, the Lakers, I picked the Lakers to get back to the finals this year with the addition of AD. LeBron's LeBron every year, and sort of how Tom Brady was with the Patriots. You can't bet against a guy who just ends up getting to the finals every year. And then he adds, one of the top 5 players in the league with him. So Lakers, not too big of a surprise. Miami, for me, I was, and I'm sure you were as well, I was confident Toronto was going to get back to the finals. In the bubble, they played well, and in the playoffs, of course, things unfolded the way they shouldn't have for Raptors Nation. But what can you do, right? And I think, like I say, this is exciting to see these two teams in the finals, primarily. And here, again, there's so many numbers that are fascinating with this finals matchup. A few of the ones that stick out are that both of these teams missed the playoffs last year. Right. And both have a completely different makeup in terms of their roster. And both finished 10th in their respective conferences and now find themselves in the finals. And LeBron being back there for the 10th time now puts him in company with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, and Sam Jones as the only 4 players in NBA history to be in the finals 10 times or more.
That's right. Okay. Go ahead.
So my question is, LeBron, 10 times in the finals, and everyone knows when the conversations come up about who's the best, it always comes down to, but how many rings does he have? Yes. Bill Russell went to the finals 13 times, and he's got 11 championships for it. Jordan went to the finals 6 times, 6 championships. Kobe, 5 championships in 6 tries. Mm-hmm. So when we look at LeBron, 10 years, and we don't want to take anything away from the fact that he's got to the finals 10 years, 10 times in his 17-year career.
All right.
Does he get another one and inch closer into that GOAT conversation?
All right. So now my question to you in response to your question is this a conversation about the GOAT, or is this a conversation about who wins this year's NBA championship?
I think it's a little bit of both.
No. Pick one. It's a pick.
All right. Okay. We're going to pick them. Let's go with the GOAT conversation first.
All right. Go. I hate this conversation.
Me too.
I hate it. I don't like it. I don't want to participate. I mean, you asked me, so I'm going to, my love and respect for you, I'm going to participate in this conversation. So I will say that MJ is the GOAT. LeBron deserves more than honorable mention. I don't think that it really matters in the end as far as all of this, because this is the conversation when all of Talking Head Sports is always about, when it comes to basketball, who is the best in the rankings and whatnot. And everybody tries to bleed some context into their argument. And what always ends up happening is their true feelings kind of come through based on what age demographic they fit in.
Yeah, right.
It's the hardest thing to escape. And I am plus 40, and I watched it. I didn't see MJ play live. Jesus Christ, I wish I had of. I could,
Me too.
I wasn't living in Chicago or any of those other U.S. cities. Although I was in Vancouver when he played the Grizzlies. Did he play the Grizzlies?
Yeah, he played the Grizzlies
once. I'm making that up. I didn't see the game. Doesn't matter. The thing of it is, I watched Jordan, and I've, like everyone else during the pandemic, have watched The Last Dance. and it has reinvigorated our memories and our appreciation and how we feel about what it is to witness something beyond what most of what we see today happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really like LeBron James. I really hate LeBron James's complaining.
Mm.
I mean, like, if we were to this is how it kind of breaks down for me in a lot of ways when it comes to this GOAT conversation, and it's a bad breakdown, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, if we were to set up if we had like the backstage pass with the audio link that TNT likes to play, right? With when they mic the players up and they hear the players go, "Hey, good shot, bro," and like all that's like, if we were to able to look at all of the audio clips of Michael Jordan talking to the refs, arguing calls, versus LeBron James talking to refs, arguing calls, versus the era they played in, right? It always comes down to this era they played in, kind of thing. So this is getting long-winded, but I'm going to stick with it. What really irritates me about this conversation is I think that both of these guys should be considered equally, right? Within the confines of the time that they played. And I don't think you can get around it. I don't think that there's a way that you can circumnavigate the conversation. And, if you were to time travel LeBron James back into the early 90s and late 80s, or if you were to bring Jordan into the late aughts and early 2010s, right? Like, because you can't do that, you can't truly measure these two players except for AKA the championships, the rings, right? Now, the fact that LeBron James, as you previously mentioned, has been to the finals 15,000 times in the last 5 years, right? Right? That is going to say something about just what his last 10 years, just what his impact is on the game. What irritates me about LeBron, and I always come from the Homer perspective, being a Raps fan, is his chronic complaining and that time that he spun the ball in whose face was it before he shot that three?
I think it was OG.
It was his OG. He spun the ball in his face and shot it and hit it. Yeah. So aside from that, I dislike LeBron's complaining vibe. I don't have the stats on Jordan's complaining vibe. I somehow suspect, given the era that they played in respectively, that Jordan's complaining ratio, percentage, shooting percentage, complaining wise, was less than.
Yeah. Well,
it didn't make sense. Am I talking about it again?
No. This is all valid, and I think I would to cap this conversation before we move into the finals. I think to echo a lot of what you said, and this is what we've both talked about this over and over in the past, that I think it goes down to a generational thing. There is no way you can contest that Bill Russell isn't the GOAT, and it's hard to contest that Michael Jordan isn't the GOAT.
Did you see Bill Russell play?
Oh no, I didn't see him play.
Of course you did.
No, of course.
No, right? It's all history.
Of
right?
course, right?
Stat sheets. It's all conjecture based on what people said.
Yes.
And people, our kids will look at us back in the day. They want to talk basketball. My daughter, your son, your daughter want to talk about basketball. We can talk about and then we can point to stats. And then, mind you, our kids have the benefit to going to YouTube or whatever variation of YouTube may be in the 20 years from now and look at Michael Jordan and LeBron James. But we can't go look at Bill Russell, right?
Yeah.
I mean, have you seen Bill Russell clips?
I've seen highlights of Bill Russell clips, but the role was so segmented and fragmented because it's technologically it obviously wasn't available. My point is to kind of cap this conversation is that it's always a generational thing. To people our grandparents' age, they will say Bill Russell. To me, I'm going to say Michael Jordan. Someone 5 years younger than me, they'll probably say Kobe, and everyone else that's younger will say LeBron James. And it's hard to argue any of that. And, I just wanted to touch base on it and get your thoughts on it because, the conversation, like in hip hop, top 5 in basketball, it always comes up as well. Who's the GOAT? So we have to go there.
So much time ranking shit.
We had no
claim on.
Yeah, and part of the problem becomes we don't appreciate what we have in front of us, and we're constantly trying to compare it. So to go back to the NBA Finals, I think this is a really exciting matchup. My brother I was talking to earlier today thinks it's going to be a cakewalk for the Lakers. I tend to disagree. I think that Miami is a solid defensive team, as are the Lakers. Miami also plays at their best when they are pushing the ball and getting points in the paint, as are the Lakers. So I think there's a lot of similarities that they do as teams. And of course, when we go to the individual matchups, it's obvious. I don't even know if LA really has a big three. If you want to look at the big three, so to
Okay.
speak, for Miami, it's obviously Butler, Dragic, and Bam. And on the other side, it's AD, LeBron, and I don't really know who their third real
Uh,
guy is. Right now, it seems like it's Rondo. And so
oh,
like Rondo's come in and played a huge impact and huge minutes for them in this last series with Denver and really getting his confidence going into the finals. So aside from the main players, I wanted to look at who we think are the X factors going into this series for both sides. Do you think there is someone on Miami that clearly stands out as an X factor for you and on the other side with LA?
okay. So to pick up where you left off and talking about LA. So obviously, LeBron, AD, it's one of the best 1-2 combos in the last 5 years, basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So your question was, who's the number 3 on LA? And I would pose a question to you in response to that. Who do you trust in LA as number 3? You said Rondo. Do you
Rondo.
trust Rondo? You trust him.
Yeah.
To do what?
To be a leader in the locker room, a general on the floor. He's won a title before. He's played with Hall of Fame players before. He brings all the qualities you need in the deeper parts of the playoffs, especially the finals.
Yes.
He's not necessarily my X factor. I know who my X factors are for both teams, and they both happen to be guys that fall in love with playing the perimeter game. But I want to get back and get your thoughts on in terms of like who do you think the X factors are for both teams?
All right. So when it comes to LA, who is my third guy? Who is the guy that's going to get me points? Who is the guy? Now, I like the Rondo call. Everything you said about Rondo, I agree with. He's got the history. He's got the championship. He's got the experience. What he also has is a lot of baggage and a poor shooting history. Mind you, he shot better in this playoffs. But I think experience can kind of overcome some of history. I think when you kind of dial it back and take it in the holistic picture. Man, when it comes to the Lakers, who is going to be the most impactful third man? You say Rondo. I want to take a flyer. I'm going to say Daniel Caruso. Why would I say that? Why would I pick the one balding white dude, undersized, who, doesn't shoot the lights out? He's not called upon to do that. But I think what Caruso offers within Frank Vogel's structure as a utility glue guy, I think that Caruso checks a lot of boxes. I think that Caruso plays fantastic defense. I think he's great positionally. I think that he can get you. He can make cuts. He can shoot the ball. He's not. I don't know his stats off the top of my head. He is probably not above a 32% 3-point shooter. However, the intangibles that he brings, his work ethic, his fuck you attitude, that you're not going to disrespect me because I'm balding and I'm white. I think that for him, I think that he can be that third X factor, right? So maybe he's my third pick and my X factor in answer to your earlier question. I think that Danny Green still has to be heard from. I mean, I have a big, soft, gooey part of my heart that is, full of love for Danny Green because of just the person that he is, the way that he conducted himself when he was in Toronto. I was sad to see him go. I was kind of hoping he would stick around. He has not performed well in this playoffs. He has not produced. He hasn't really been that effective as a D man. However, I think that he has more to offer. I think you will see something from him. I do not discount what you said about Rondo. I agree with everything you said about Rondo. I want to add Caruso as that player that can make the impact that may not be seen on the stat sheet. I've watched him play. I listened to countless people talk about, what he can offer. I tend to agree from what I've witnessed. Oh my God, there's so much to talk about with the Lakers.
Let's go X factor on Miami before we go too deep into LA.
Okay. Now, see, you gotta pull the chain on me because I'm gonna get away from you if you let me. Okay, so now Miami, it's much easier. All right, to call this because Bam Adebayo is the best player in the NBA outside of LeBron James, and maybe 80. No, yeah, maybe just under 80. Maybe the same as AD. I'm not sure yet. We're going to see when they match up, right? But what Bam Adebayo does is what he offers beyond his skill set is a heart and a commitment and just a fuck you, I'm getting this done attitude that just there's no comparison. Only Kyle Lowry can measure up in the heart department, right? Maybe Marcus Smart. In the heart department, all right? In the heart department with Bam Adebayo. Look, where I began and where I have come from and who I had to prove wrong to get here. That is what is the most impressive thing about Bam Adebayo. And the storyline, which everyone who follows sports really loves, beyond the box scores, the storyline is what we really pay attention to.
But he's not your X factor.
Is he my X factor? No, he's my staple.
He's your staple.
So what X factor, right? So you said that's why my mind went there first.
Okay.
So X factor. Okay. So, I think the Dragon would be the X factor. If Dragon can be Goran, if he can be on point, hitting shots, making plays, getting assists, I think that Jimmy Butler is a stapler as well. I want to lay the staples because I haven't talked about Miami at all. I want to lay the staples out first, then we'll get to the X factors.
Well, let's stick with the X factors. We'll go back into the teams deeper, but let's stick. We'll go topical first.
God, I want to set the story. All right, fair enough. So X factor, I think Goran, Tyler Hero, obviously, and Duncan Robinson. Yeah, those are three that are candidates for X factors.
Okay, well, let me
on how you frame the conversations to where those guys fit versus like X factor versus staple.
Right. Okay. Now, I'm really glad you brought up Danny Green. And like yourself, I love Danny Green in Toronto. He brought great defensive presence, pressure. He performed, especially in the playoffs in that last series against Golden State. He had a few huge games at Game 3 where he scored 5 3-pointers, and he had some rundown blocks in Game 6. Like he came through. Danny Green, and I agree, hasn't performed. I personally feel like Danny Green, outside of the very first game of the season against the Clippers where he dropped plus 30, hasn't performed really well all season. He hasn't really found his niche with the Lakers. Now, in the West Finals, these were Danny Green's numbers. He averaged 6.5 points a game, 27% from the field, 29% from the three-point line. So for me, this is a guy who is the X factor for the Lakers. I think everyone else, I think Caruso comes in and performs because he has nothing to lose. And he just has, and he has the mentality where he's just going to come in and go to the rack. He goes to the rack. He tries to put it down on guys. I think Danny Green, going back to your point and, referencing what he did in Toronto defensively, I think in basketball, as sports in general, if what you normally do isn't working, you play defense. And I think he needs to pull back a bit and just play the defensive game. The Lakers were the second team in the NBA in terms of fast break points a game, Toronto being the first. And I think, you get your fast break comes off of defense. Defense turns into offense. I think Danny Green locks up a few of the guys up top of that three-point line, gets his hands in passing lanes. We'll start to see a bit of a difference. And also, I think Danny Green's a really big X factor for LA because Miami plays that zone. And if anyone knows anything about zone defenses, it is fantastic if you're a three-point shooter because you are sitting outside all day. If you can break that zone, which LeBron James will be able to break from the top of the key every single time, he's got his shooter sitting around, and Danny Green's got to deliver. Yeah. I think that on the same token, on the other side for Miami, Jay Crowder, to me, is the X factor. Because again, I think Hero's going to get it done, much like Caruso. He comes in, he's got the balls to just be like, give me the ball and get out of the way. I'm going to score. At one point in the East Finals, Jay Crowder was 5 for 35 from 3-point field.
Yeah.
So if you are living and dying on that 3-point line against a team like LA, it's never going to work because they're just going to turn around and go down on you, 100 miles an hour, and they're just going to run over you all game and get that fast break point percentage up the way they normally like. Now, if he's shooting 5 for 35, in my opinion, you saw what he did in that last game, in game 6 against Boston. He started going to the hoop more. He started doing pick and rolls, getting himself in the paint, Jay Crowder, and he was starting to play defense and use his strength. There's not a lot of guys on LA that can really compete with him, and I think him and Morris might be a nice matchup in LA. Yeah. So I think, when you see those two guys, I think, and especially Danny Green, like with the zone defense Miami plays, he needs to be consistently shooting from the line, getting back to his defensive game. And Crowder, I think same thing, lock in on defense, get back in the paint and abuse guys in the paint and get those garbage buckets. They're going to need to draw fouls on the bigs on LA because now, and this kind of goes into something now we'll start talking about, laying into the main stage players, right? So this goes back now into the full team versatility of LA. And I think what they've done by reinserting Dwight Howard into the starting lineup has made
talk about him.
No, well, hold on. The reinsertion of Dwight Howard into the starting lineup has added great energy for the Lakers. He obviously is a handful to deal with, and he gets their big guys in foul trouble. AD and Dwight Howard on the floor at the same time, to me, poses a problem for Miami because they don't necessarily have the bigs to deal with them. When they start getting some of their bigs in trouble, I don't know if they're going to start bringing in dudes off the bench. Like Kelly Olynyk doesn't really play down in the paint. Myers Leonard doesn't really play outside of being a cheerleader. So, I think that when we start looking at some of these players on LA, especially the reinsertion of Dwight Howard in the starting lineup, I think they could be a problem.
All right. So, okay. You made excellent points. Like Dwight Howard. So you know what? Yes, I agree. If he plays well, his presence in the paint, like I would almost rather have JaVale McGee in that spot, but Dwight Howard has done some good things. I mean, despite the fact that he's a fucking wingnut, and the things that he does, like, the whole the Batman thing, right? You hear about that?
He's got a lot of antics. He's got a lot of antics on the floor.
Okay, so if you want to brush aside the antics just for the fact that he's playing well, I get that. That's fine.
100%.
But so you're absolutely correct. There's going to be some matchup issues size-wise, right? Like Kelly Olynyk, can he adjust his game? Can he draw Dwight out to the 3-point line, right? If they put Myers Leonard's played 9 minutes in this entire playoffs. So you might need to leave that frat boy on the bench flexing. That's where he belongs, right? And when the season is done and they ship his ass off to fucking Sacramento, which is where that idiot belongs, put him there. Right, the hell with Myers Leonard. He doesn't belong in the series. It's going to be a matchup game, right? And if Miami can leave Bam at the 5 and just have the multiple threats, right, to make guys like Dwight Howard, who just gets lost on defense all the time, can't check a man, flails around.
Well, hold on though. Is
technicals.
You stand by a lot of what Bam does on the floor, but we both know he's not a 3-point shooter. So for the defensive bigs on LA, AD's too smart to chase him all the way out to the 3-point line.
No, we're talking about Dwight Howard.
Even if Dwight Howard watches the film and buys into the defensive concepts and doesn't march out to the 3-point line, because Bam's not going to shoot from there, right? So in terms of dragging, but my point is in terms of dragging their bigs out of the paint, Bam is kind of the only guy that's going to do that because that's who they're looking at. So if he can't do that, Miami's going to have some problems going to the hoop because AD and Dwight Howard down there cause massive problems.
Okay, so what I'm suggesting is if they put Dwight in the game, and most likely he'll get some spot time, right? Until he's made, until his play rules him, inadmissible in that game, which I predict it will. I think that basically Dwight Howard is gonna take second line spots, right? And he's going to be a stopgap measure to get AD through the game because AD is going to play the 5, right? Because I think that AD is going to have to match up against Bam because he is Bam's ultimate counterpart. He's a little bit taller. He's every bit as skilled, if not more, by an edge. And people have been talking about AD for the last 5 years about what a great player he is, right? So
we love numbers. AD is averaging 29.6 points per game right now in the playoffs. Right? And a guy like him is LeBron's been in his ear, and he's gonna want to guard Bam Adebayo.
To counter this, you just quoted a stat in the playoffs. Who have the Lakers played in the playoffs? Name the teams.
Who did they play in the first round? Okay, so let's go backwards. Denver. Let's go backwards. Well, let's on that note, regardless of who both teams played, both teams records.
Stats, right, for teams, for players, you need to know who they were up against. I would say to you right now that Bam Adebayo and the Miami Heat have played a select number of really good teams, where the Lakers have played a select number of pretty piss poor teams, right? Who have offered them, matchups where they completely excelled in. And the Rockets, hooray, small ball, right? Goodbye, Daryl Morey. Find another job. Before that, Jesus Christ, who did they play before that? Now I'm thinking about it.
Well, you're calling me out, man. You got to have your stats.
All right. I'm so busy thinking about. So basically,
so busy getting angry, you forget what you're talking about.
So busy trying to scream, make a point, eh?
Yeah.
My apologies. But the main point being is that the Lakers have a much easier time for the Western Conference than the Heat have had. They played the Raptors in the second round. They played Boston in the third round. 2 quality pick'em matchups. Who they ultimately
they played Milwaukee.
They played Milwaukee. Sorry, yeah. I'm still on the Raps. I'm still stuck. Yeah. All right, so they beat Boston. They beat Milwaukee. Right? They found a way using the Raptors playbook to beat Milwaukee. Right, in that second round. Then they beat Boston and took down the Raptors, who had the next 2 budding superstars in both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, with a surging Marcus Hart, who has, every bit as much heart as even LeBron. You know what? He's got great heart. I love Marcus Hart for all of his flopping. I still love him as a player. So I think that the path the Heat took to get to this place is much more fire tested than what the Lakers took. They beat the Nuggets, right? And they beat the Rockets. And in the first round, they beat – who did they beat in the first round? I don't know. I don't even remember either. I can't remember either. That's how unforgettable that team was.
Yeah.
Right? So they took care of – they dispatched each of those teams fairly quickly, right? Whereas, Miami they took care of Milwaukee in a surprising, shocking number of games. Mm-hmm. And Boston kind of in the same way, although they were all hotly contested, really close games, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I like the narrative of the Heat better. I like the way their team is constituted better. I think they have a lot more weapons. I think that with the Lakers, you have 2 guys, and then you have these aging, veteran all-stars that are just kind of this loose collective. Who can show up at any night. We both love Danny Green. I mean, Danny Green is a streaky shooter. Mm-hmm. Danny can get hot. Danny could potentially get hot and shoot 40%. And all of a sudden, then he's the 3 guy, right? Rondo is showing that he can perform, right? Like you quoted Dwight Howard. I don't believe it. I think it's a mirage.
Hold on, but when I'm referring to Dwight Howard, I'm strictly referring to the energy, the change up in the lineup that the team has to do defensively to deal with him. I'm not talking about the antics. I'm not talking about the fact that he's had a past career. I'm not talking about him traveling to different teams and all that stuff aside. It's the impact on the game that I'm concerned about. I don't care about the personal stuff. I don't know him personally. I'm not looking to hang out with him. I'm just talking the game.
Personally, we can just look at his history.
Right. Now,
we can wait for an implosion. So this is how you cannot discount it by saying you don't know him personally. All right. Like the fact that Dwight Howard has this long history, and it's a predictor of what could be evidence in this playoff series.
Right.
I don't think it's something you want to lay bets on, lay your money on, but it is not something that you discount either.
No, you don't discount it, but also I don't think he's that much of a focus that we're looking for Dwight Howard to implode. Like he gets benched quickly because JaVale McGee can take his spot, and LeBron James runs that team and will be in his ear pretty quickly. To answer a question that both of us couldn't answer earlier, Miami played Indiana in the first round, and LA played Portland in the first round, who was coming in hot. They were coming in hot. But when you look at some of these teams, Antetokounmpo was banged up playing against Miami. Lillard was banged up, didn't even play the final game against LA, and they won that first game against the Lakers. Both teams getting to the finals are 12-3. So I don't necessarily buy the argument that one team had an easier route to get there than the other one. I think they've both. I would agree that Miami has played some great teams. And now on paper, LA has played some great teams too. However, when I'm looking at strictly the numbers, because it's a numbers game, 12-3, they both went 12-3 to get to the finals. So they've both proven their path to the finals. They both proved that they are meant to be here. And
they're both there proves the fact they deserve to be there. But I think that, it's listen to here, Moneyball, right? It's not about 12-3 necessarily. I think that the way that these teams got to the place that they're at matters if you want to talk predictions. You're absolutely right. That's what the stats show. However, we both watched all those games, and we both see the nuance of, what goes beyond box score. And, I don't think that LeBron and company have been truly tested to this point. I just don't think.
Here's an interesting, we talk about nuances and guys that bring that nuance to the game. Andre Iguodala, and I'm talking about guys being reinserted into the lineup. So Dwight Howard being reinserted into the lineup, I felt like brought some good energy in for LA. Iguodala getting more minutes for Miami has been a huge lift for them defensively. In Game 6, offensively, he scored 12 points in 11 minutes.
37 years old, isn't he?
Yeah, and hit some big threes. And also, let's remember, he won his sole finals MVP guarding LeBron James in the finals.
Yes, so good.
We bring back a guy that has, championship pedigree, and again can also sort of work his way and weasel his way into that sort of X factor conversation. Do you think there's any truth to Iguodala being a big impact for Miami in the finals?
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know what? Thank you. Maybe he's the X factor. In answer to your earlier question, maybe Iguodala is the guy that has all the playoff experience, has guarded LeBron in the past, knows his tendencies. There's always is he compromised? He kind of had this little ankle thing, like even in, a couple of games ago where he kind of tweaked himself. But he hit a lot of big shots in that last game against Boston. He's been making plays. He's been playing solid D. His hairline attests to his age. I'm just saying.
In that case, LeBron should be like 50.
Oh, no, LeBron had that fixed. Anyway, I'm just saying, Iguodala is an absolute X factor. But here's the thing. With Miami, a lot of guys can be X factors. I've already talked about Duncan Robinson. I mentioned him. Talked about Tyler Hero. Obviously, everybody's aware of him now.
Mm-hmm.
Iguodala, people aren't talking about him, but you just did. And I give you props. Yes, he is an X factor. So, is Kenny Olynyk an X factor? Maybe. He's got the potential, right? Is James Jones? Can he get up and guard some guys and play spot minutes and be effective? Yes. He's a good defensive player, high riser, athletic. He can be a guy you can insert, right? And Goran, I picked him because, you know what? He's a vet and he's savvy and he's got a good left-right, good crossover. And, these are I'm just listing off all these guys on Miami that just have the potential to be the fill-in guy that can get you 20 points and 10 rebounds, or not even, right? Like give you 15 points and 5 rebounds, whatever. In 15 minutes of play, they can go minute per point, stats. but that is why I really do have faith in Miami. Now, everybody's picking. If you look at the Vegas lines, it's everybody's picking Lakers. I think it's 3-1. I think you could make $300 on a $100 bet if you bet the Lakers for the finals.
Yeah.
Vegas is running right now, so that just gives you a little indication of where everybody wants to throw their change. And aside from the playoff tested experience factor, which LeBron gets all of because he's got 10 finals appearances, whatevs, in his history. Aside from that one X factor, everything in my view leans towards Miami, right? And if they completely self-destruct because of the pressure, then I will be proven wrong.
There, you mentioned a lot of guys off of Miami. There's a couple of matchups that I wrote down that I think from the bench perspective are interesting in this series. And you mentioned both guys already in this conversation. And I think the Caruso Hero matchup, whether or not that is a face-up head-to-head matchup, but I just think both of those guys coming off the bench are the most effective players for both teams. Do you think either one of them has an edge in this finals matchup?
Interesting comparison. So Caruso and Hero, while they play similar positions and they may occupy similar positions on their bench, they're both very different players. They do very different things, right? Mm-hmm. So Hero is the cocky spot up guy that will take that shot and hit it, and it's proven that he is not afraid. I mean, not just in the playoffs, but all season. Like, he's always looking to drop
and
his dick on the court.
He can go to the rack, but he can't finish like Caruso can finish at the rack.
Ooh. Okay,
he doesn't play above. He doesn't play above the rim.
Okay, that's a twist. I think of Caruso. I think of his defense first. I think of his playmaking ability. I think of his positional awareness and which makes him really good on defense is his smarts to compensate for his lack of athletic ability. I think that Caruso is a guy that, and I've heard Vogel talk about Caruso as being an integral utility glue guy that helps them go when they get stuck, because he's the guy that obviously is not going to demand the ball, obviously, and a guy that is not going to scream and yell at players, and he is there to make things work. His only function is to make things work, and whatever utility blade in that knife that he has to be, he can do that, right? Like, he's got enough of a skill set, and more importantly, enough of a smart set to do that. So when you talk about Hero, and Hero is a smart kid too, and Hero knows where to be, and that's not to take away from his basketball IQ. I just think that Hero has the youth advantage on his side. He has a confidence advantage on his side, obviously, and I think that he is the guy. If you're going to compare the two as far as another X factor on either team that can make a bigger impact, then you have to go with Hero, just because of his sheer confidence and scoring ability. I think you cannot discount Caruso. I think that, of all the things that I already said about him, I don't want to belabor the point, but I don't think that his impact measures to Hero's impact when they're both performing well. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And another bench matchup that I thought, not necessarily head-to-head, but just two guys that I feel like can provide a nice little lift for both teams defensively, and also just spotting up and hitting a couple threes, is Kuzma, who I feel like, I don't know where he went in the last few years, right? Like in the 3 years ago, Kuzma was beginning to be a big deal. In the last couple of years, I don't know where Kuzma's gone. He sort of disappeared. Kelly Olynyk, we've mentioned him a couple of times already. I think Olynyk brings in, he's kind of gritty, he can run the floor, he can play down in the paint, get you some rebounds and get under guys' skins, and he's an agitator and he can put up a few threes. Who do you think in that matchup, draws an edge for their team? I personally think Olynyk has an edge over Kuzma. Kuzma doesn't really seem like he seems like he's lost his confidence as it once were.
Yeah. Okay. So if you want to do the matchup game, let's way. Yeah. Okay. So I will speak to this. So I think that as far as Kuzma was the next big thing.
He was
3 years ago. He was going to be. I mean, they traded away.
They traded Ingram away too.
And they traded
Lonzo.
Lonzo. I was going to say LaMelo. The recency bias, right? So one of the Ball brothers, they traded him away. Which one? I don't remember. Okay, so Lonzo goes, right? But they kept Kuzma, thinking that he would be the guy that was going to take the next step, right?
Mm-hmm.
LeBron got there after the trade happened, and I guess it was before the trade happened. No, after the trade happened, yeah. So, and they thought that he would somehow develop under LeBron's tutelage, or maybe perhaps like LeBron could be the guy that would show him the way, that would give him that extra gear, that it could lend him some teachability, some coachability, because I mean, let's face it, when it comes to the LA Lakers, LeBron is basically the coach and the GM, maybe the president too. Like LeBron pretty much is the king, and he reigns over Lakerland. And I don't think it was like an MJ situation with Kwame Brown necessarily, right? But like, I think that right? Like, I honestly think that like LeBron has not done enough for Kyle Kuzma, or maybe he has and Kuzma hasn't responded. Either way, Kuzma remains a streaky shooter who gets lost on defense, who forgets his assignments, is. Again, I think I already said this, streaky like Danny Green, right? But is totally talented. But if you're giving me that comp of Olynyk versus Kuzma, I'm taking on my Canadian Saskatoon boy.
Yeah,
and I think it's Saskatoon. But anyway, like Saskatchewan boy, like I think that what Kelly Olynyk does is know his role, is confident in what he does, can perform it when he's called upon, and if he misses shots, he still works. And I think Kyle Kuzma is a young guy who doesn't know his role, who is not confident, and quite frankly gets lost and trying to figure out what his assignment is, either offensively or defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, in my case, there it is.
Yeah. And I was going to go into the point guard matchup. I think Dragic and Rondo is an interesting matchup because Dragic, I feel like, is kind of the engine, so to speak, for that team. Like Miami's pace goes as he goes. And they're the games that they've played poorly in are the games that he's played poorly in terms of attacking the basket, moving the ball, keeping the energy and the pace going for the Heat. And Rondo, as we've seen in this last series of Denver, his defense has stepped up. So I wonder if Rondo plays some sort of mitigating factor to Dragic playing at the level that he's accustomed to, and how that affects, the flow of Miami playing this game.
Yeah. Can I pose you a question?
Yes.
In response. All right. So it's a little bit off topic, but it's something that's been kind of like rattling around in my head, and I wrote it down earlier. I just wanted to kind of check in. I didn't want to lose it in case we broke. But can the Heat beat the Lakers from the 3-point line?
Well, when you look at what they did in the last series with Boston, the number of 3-point field goals they made decreased per game.
Right.
So they were either shooting less because they were making less. And, I go back to Crowder being 5 for 35 at one point, or they changed the game plan and decided to get away from the 3 line. Now, when it comes to whether or not they can beat them from the 3-point line, I think yes, because you touched on all those guys from Miami. You talk about Olynyk can hit, even if he gives you two or three a game. Duncan Robinson obviously can shoot threes. You get him open enough, he'll put some buckets on you. Dragic can shoot some threes. Jimmy Butler doesn't shoot any threes really, so I'm not really worried about him from the 3-point line. Obviously Tyler Hero. Who knows? I didn't really see Kendrick Nunn in the last parts of that series against Boston.
Who's in? Right?
Well, Kendrick Nunn was their starting point guard all year. He's a rookie, and he got hurt. And Dragic only played 4 games all season. And so when he got hurt, Dragic came in, and he's been revitalized and turned the clock back and what have you. But I don't.
Is that what Kendrick Lamar? Is that what you? Is that
no? Kendrick Nunn.
Does he play in the league?
Yeah.
Sure.
But LA, I don't think LA. Back to the Danny Green thing. If Danny Green can start hitting some buckets, maybe some other guys get confidence. And sometimes it's all it takes is one guy to start hitting them, and everyone else, really saying like, all right, I'm gonna start putting them up too. I just need to see one get through the hoop. So, if Danny can start hitting some threes, yeah, I think KCP actually had some nice games in the last 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not looking for him to, again, like when we talk about these guys contributing from the 3-point line, it's, are you hitting 2? Are you hitting 3? That's all we're looking for, because AD's putting up 30 points a game. LeBron James can put up whatever he wants at this point because he's on a mission. So I think, Miami has the edge from the 3-point line as far as that matchup's concerned.
Okay. That's what I thought too. All right.
Now, here is something that in like the folklore of sports only exists, is the momentum, the invisible momentum, this sort of momentum that comes in by virtue of spirit, by virtue of somebody saying something big, like I guarantee we're going to win a game, or like Ray Lewis saying he was going to retire. Ray Lewis announced his retirement before the playoffs started, and Baltimore subsequently won the Super Bowl that year. Right. Kobe Bryant obviously passing this year in the tragic fashion that he did, and the Mamba mentality, the legacy he has as the Lakers' all-time leading franchise offensive point production and offensive category and everything. And just he is the landmark of that team outside of Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Sure. And I feel like they are on a mission, like LeBron James being a really close friend with Kobe Bryant, winning 2 different gold medals with him, growing up in this league with them, playing against him, playing with him, and kind of going 1-2 punch with him throughout their entire careers in terms of who's the best player in the league. Yeah. I feel like there is this momentum and this spirit that LA has with them, and that LeBron, more importantly, has with them, that sort of is writing this storybook ending to their season, as tragic as it's been. The only way to really bring it any sort of joy and justice is to win this title. And you saw what he said to AD last game: "This is my time." And, he said, "This is my time." And he looked at the team and said, "Just get it to me." So he's on a mission, right? And this guy just is playing outside of his mind. Do you believe in any of that? Do you think that there is this momentum and this energy that the Lakers have been building because of Kobe and what they're trying to accomplish this year? And is there any truth to that?
Yeah, look, man, I agree completely. I love a narrative. Like I talked about this, I spoke to this a little bit earlier, right? Like the narrative of what is more romantic to you, right? Like you just brought up the Kobe Laker, the heritage there, the continuation, the championships, the winning attitude, LeBron wanting to follow in the footsteps and pay homage and really indoctrinate himself into the LA Laker culture, right? Despite the fact that he's already done that with Cleveland and then done it with the Heat, ironically enough. And then now with the Lakers, he wants to kind of insinuate himself through winning into that pedigree, that echelon, that history. I love the narratives. Like the NBA is so rich with narrative, right? And personally, I just like the Miami Heat narrative better, right? Like I think that Bam's, like you look at a player like Bam Adebayo, who, he has like a picture of the single wide trailer that he grew up in with his mom, with a single parent, right? Like just the hard work ethic, the just never say die thing. I'm going to get there. I'm going to make good. And then he does it, right? Like I've seen enough of LeBron. I think he's earned his spot. Romantically, I'm not invested in like his story anymore. I don't care about his homage to LA and his insinuating himself as the GOAT over Michael Jordan. I think that, to me, if we're talking simply stories and narrative, I am much more invested in the Heat story. I really am. The Heat have Pat Riley, and how he has orchestrated this. I think it would be so nice if the Heat won this year, especially for Pat Riley, as a big fucking middle finger poked in your both eyes to LeBron, as a, like dating back to like 2014, 15, 2016, whenever he left, to LeBron. Not that I hate LeBron. I don't hate LeBron. It's nothing. There's not me doing that. I think it's funny, like if the Heat win this, then, Pat Riley will smoke the fattest cigar.
Yeah.
Right, probably laced with weed, and drink the finest scotch on the planet, and toast LeBron's, demise in the championships. I think I kind of find that funny. And I like Jimmy Butler. I mean, despite all of his, we haven't talked to him at all. We've talked about it. We're over an hour. And one of the Miami's most important players, we barely mentioned him. I think this is like the second person to mention him, and it was like half an hour ago since his name has been spoke. But despite all of his bullshit, like his JUCO, his come up through JUCO and like just fighting and scrapping his way into the league, earning his spot, his early years with Tom Thibodeau, who was apparently a consummate ball buster, who just baptized Butler in a fucking lake of fire, right? That helped get Jimmy to where he is and his work ethic. Despite whatever Jimmy did with the whole Minnesota thing, I mean, I guess history has proven him right, whether you liked what he did or not with his whole ESPN interview and practice and whatever.
Yeah.
Slagging Wiggins and Cat. You can argue that all day. I'm saying he was probably right about that. But so I'm still rooting for Jimmy, even though I hated him when he played the Raptors. Kelly Olynyk, he's a Canadian boy, and he played for Boston. I guess it doesn't really matter about that, but I mean, he's had some success in the league. He's shown his bona fides. He belongs in the NBA. Tyler Hero is a fantastic story, which it's the fresh years for him. It's like as baby face as you could possibly get in the NBA, being 20 years old, right? Like, doesn't that all the things that I'm saying? Doesn't that give you a more? Isn't that a more kind of engaging narrative than the Lakers?
Well, there's, yes, to a degree, 100%. I think that there is so many so many storylines, and we go even with Jimmy Butler, kicked out of his house when he was 13 by his mom, got raised by foster parents, and like you said, scrapped his way, clawed his way to Marquette, where he played with Jay Crowder and Marquette. So they're in the finals together. So this is nice. And then you look at the leader of that team, Eric Spoelstra. He came up in the video analyzing basement of the Miami Heat and crawled his way up to the head coaching position and is now going for his 5th NBA finals. In the Bam story with the trailer with his mom, like there's a lot of really good stories here. Dragic even, who's kind of, for most people, would have thought that he's already had the peak of his career and now in the finals playing, turning the clock back, playing that way. I think the romantic part of the LA story, of course, is, winning it for Kobe. I think that's kind of what they're hanging their hat on. And then also, I think that from between the AD and LeBron matchup, it's AD saying, I want to get LeBron back to the finals, and LeBron saying, I want to get AD his championship. So they're trying to find something within their team because they don't necessarily have the stories, right? Like they don't have
that angle. It's very compelling.
Yeah, they don't necessarily have the story. So I think from like a sports perspective, when you see what Miami has had to endure, the players, I should say, on Miami has had to endure. And I should note as well, there's 15 players playing in this finals that have all played in the G League. So you get a lot of these guys who have just been working their ass off to get to not only the league, but now they're in the finals. They've been clawing for minutes, and so it's a really interesting story and compelling story and points that you bring up with Miami. And again, like this is, as sports, loves to dictate a lot of the games are always based on emotion. And from a sports fan's perspective, especially for you and I, who don't really have a vested interest in either team, we kind of look for those stories because we want to pull for one team or the other. Traditionally, LA is a very polarizing team, like the New York Yankees. You either love them or you hate them. Same with the Boston Celtics. I've never liked LA. I've only liked players off the team. I love Magic Johnson. But at the same time, I never liked them because they were the Bulls' biggest competition in the finals, and Michael proved them wrong. But I think that I personally also am rooting for Miami to win this series. Nothing against LA or the players or the cause or what they're fighting for, but like you said, I hated Jimmy Butler when he used to play against Toronto with Chicago because he used to ice us all the time. But and I used to feel like he was really misunderstood with Philly, with Minnesota, and I don't think anyone really bought into what he was trying to bring to the team. And then he gets in a situation like Miami. And I think the first person who got in his ear was Pat Riley, and they seem to be on the same page.
Absolutely.
And Pat Riley, you talk about him in terms of the storylines. Pat Riley won 5 titles with the Lakers. So there's so many stories that are going on through the narrative of Miami that it makes you want to pull for Miami a little more. And
Well,
again, they're the underdogs. They're the underdogs, and I love the underdogs.
yeah. But beyond the underdog story, as far as like the Vegas storyline that I mentioned earlier, the Vegas betting line, is the fact that that they just have this, they have a collective team cohesiveness. I also think, we haven't talked about this at all, but I want to throw this out there, and you can please pipe up if you think I'm wrong, is the coaches. Spoelstra, you and I both believe that Spoelstra is the superior coach.
Totally.
Correct? So now, having also said that, I also don't think that Frank Vogel is a bad coach. Obviously, he had a lot of good years with Miami. He was in control of that team. Now, I also made mention earlier about the fact that, is Frank Vogel really the coach of the LA Lakers, or is it more like a player-coach situation? And I think we both know the answer to that question. Because Frank Vogel can call all kinds of sets and schemes, and then LeBron will just call audibles on the court, like what he sees fit. And he's probably right? Like, because he is the smartest basketball player on the face of the planet. Like, you can make all kinds of claims about his accolades as far as LeBron is, but his best asset is his brain. And that he sees the floor, and the key is such a chess master about seeing moves 3 times ahead of whatever move you're going to make on the chessboard. And he does it within nanoseconds, split-second decision-making. He is, and we talked about this the other day, you and I, we were watching that last Boston Heat game. He's got almost 20 years now of experience on the court, and yet he still has this freakish athletic ability by investing $1 million in his body every year. So maybe that part or two, but like, he just has, at 37, is he? I gotta look it up. I'm just pulling it out of my ass. I'm not quite sure. He's either 36 or 37 years old, or is he 35?
It's about right, because he came in the league when he was 18 or 19, and he's played 17 years.
2003 was his first year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if he came in when he was 17 as a high school player?
I think it was 18 or 19. So let's just say 18, just to throw it out.
So we're going to call him 36 for the purposes of this podcast, okay? If we're wrong. But, like, he has been in the league so long and yet remained at peak physical condition. And yet, it's like that old adage, like, I wish I knew then what I know now. Well, LeBron is living that dream. He knows then, he knows now what he knew, but, like, he knows now what he wanted to know then. And his body is still as reactive, right? Like, it is that good. And, that is why he is just the best. He is, I mean, like, the argument about KD and stuff, I mean, we've kind of forgotten about KD because of the Achilles thing, right? But he'll be back next year, and I'm sure he'll make his play to be recognized as the best basketball player in the face. But LeBron is the smartest basketball player on the face of the planet, and has been for I want to say the last at least 7-8 years, right? He is the smartest basketball player, and yet has the best physical athletic ability. He's managed to maintain it into his well-advanced. He's in his old middle age. He's an old guy now in part of basketball, but he's a middle-aged man now, like, even life terms, right? And you and I terms, like, he's a middle-aged man. Like, he could buy his Corvette and then shave his ball, right? And get the trophy wife, right? Like, if he was divorced or whatever, right? Like, all the cliches apply to that.
Here's 2 points that I want to kind of reaffirm to what you said, and him being, having the highest basketball IQ in the game right now, maybe if ever, that there was this press conference. I can't remember what year it was, and you'll remember what I'm talking about, where the reporter asked him what happened in the last minute of the game, and he literally, play for play, sequence for sequence, ran down the entire play for them. And then the press, after he finished, like, he literally went from, and the ball went to this guy's hand, and they swung it across court, and then they dribbled into the free throw line, and they passed it out, and they moved it around back to the weak side, and he just went through the whole sequence. And the reporters had nothing else to do at the end but just to kind of laugh and be like, I can't believe he just did that. Like he just finished that game playing as intensely as he was, and he just remembered every single minute detail to what happened in the last minute of it. Also, to go back on the point of LeBron calling audibles, it reminds me of the old. I think it was when Michael Jordan hit the jumper over Craig Elo in the playoffs, and they were asking Doug Collins after the fact in the press conference what that play was in the huddle, and he said, "Pass the ball to Michael, and everyone get the fuck out of the way."
Yeah, Doug Collins.
That's Frank Vogel, right? Give the ball to LeBron, everybody get out of the way and let him do what he does.
Press conference. Get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
Right? That's pretty G.
So, you know, obviously we, like you said, we didn't touch on Jimmy Buckets a lot. There was so many other things going on with this series that I wanted to touch on before the series starts tomorrow. So I'm sure we'll talk about Jimmy Butler a little bit more and more. We'll talk about the fact that he scores 33% of his points in the fourth quarter. Like, he's a closer. So we'll see if he can continue that through the finals.
Always be closing.
Now, before we go, obviously the question, we're on the eve of the finals, game one.
Prediction time?
Who wins tomorrow's first game?
Right. You put it to me first?
Yep.
All right, first. I say Heat in 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bold.
I love it. You got to go big, go home. I'm going big in the money line.
That's bold. I would like to think. Now, who wins tomorrow's game, though?
First game?
Yeah.
Oh. LA.
Okay. Now, I tend to agree with that only because you have, you know, when you saw Miami try to close out Boston in game 5, they looked a little scattered. And I think because of their lack of experience, they didn't necessarily know how to close out a series. Obviously, it took them 24 hours to figure it out, and they came back the next game and did it in substantial fashion in that fourth quarter. Scored 37 points in that fourth quarter to close them out. And I don't think they necessarily have obviously Spoelstra has the fortitude of what the finals takes to win, but he's not on the court. And when you got a leader like LeBron on the court and you got a guy like AD on the court, even though he's never been to the finals, he's playing out of his mind. I feel like LA comes in with a composure under LeBron's guidance and takes that first game. I don't think it'll be a rout. I think it'll be a close battle. I think Miami comes out swinging. And I think in order for Miami to be effective, they need to get into the paint. They need to just push the ball. Dragic needs to be their engine. But I think tomorrow night, I think we're both in agreement, LA wins that first game. As far as Miami in 6, as a bold prediction, I think that whoever wins this series, I think whoever wins this series will go 6 games. I don't know who.
Did you just back away from a prediction there?
From yours?
No, you just said, I think that whoever wins this series, I haven't heard your prediction yet.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So whoever wins this series, I think it will go 6 games, regardless on either side. I think at the end of the day, LeBron James wills his team to win this series.
Okay. All right.
Not to pick favorites, not that he's a more favorite player than some of the players I have on Miami. I'm rooting for Miami to win. But from prediction standpoint, I think LA wins.
All right.
I think LA wins.
I got you. All right. That's fine. I think that a lot of people are on that side, and I understand all the arguments we've laid out a lot of the arguments behind either case and getting to this prediction. I'm making a heart play. I understand the play that the call and the prediction. I want to root for the team that I want to win. So I'm going to go a little bit against the head play. I'm going with the heart. I'm going to pick the Heat. I do think as per our conversation, the previous hour we've been talking, I've laid out enough of the pathways, the routes to get to victory. I think if people execute, I think that Miami has the guns. And it all depends upon the confidence and the ability to execute, as these things always do play out. And when it comes to sports, it's not on paper. It's the games aren't played on paper; they're played on the floor, and the execution will be the key. So, obviously, we're going to hook up again on this one. Mm-hmm. We're going to go head to head on this. I'll have a bit more stats next time, as I promised I would last time that we did this. if you get time, jet over. We'll watch that game one. We'll watch that game one together. All right.
Absolutely. All right, man. So game one tomorrow night, Miami Heat, LA Lakers, 2020 finals live from the bubble.
Yes.
It is an unprecedented season. It's going to be an unprecedented finals. And I think there's going to be a lot of storylines that come true in this one. And a lot of players that break out. We'll see what happens tomorrow night's game. And I think we'll try to touch base after game one, if not game two, and kind of continue that until this series is over. I want to, again, thank you for coming on to the show. This has been episode 4, Studio Steve. We're talking basketball. We're going to continue talking basketball until the series is over. Thank you, Chris. Thank you to everyone for watching. I appreciate y'all. And we'll see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Peace out, man.
Peace out.